It is a Sunday night that's normally reserved during the regular season for Eagles talk. And my guest tonight, Al Thompson, who loves to talk about the Eagles, tonight will be something completely different for those who are tuning in. And we appreciate everyone who tunes in on broadsdsouth.com, over on Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, also on AMP Radio. And yes, you guys can catch us on YouTube as well. So 4 different ways you can watch the show and listen in on the show as well. And we do appreciate Al Thompson coming on tonight, as tonight the subject will be about steroids. If you have young children, young adults, if you have an athlete in your family or someone in your family, it doesn't matter, because steroids, like any other drug, doesn't care what person it is that's putting that poison into their system. So Al will be with us, and if you guys see the picture up there with Lou Stoltzman, we'll talk about that as well, as he gave the finger to the POYS, which is Protect Our Youth from Steroids, that organization. And Al will let us know the reason behind that picture as well. So lots to get into. It is episode 197. Ryan is with me along with Al Thompson. We do appreciate everyone who's tuning in tonight. Once again, on Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game. With that being said, we'll get the show underway because there's a lot to talk about this evening. So if you are sensitive to materials that we'll be talking about this evening, I would say you may want to tune away. If not, if you want to learn a lot more and the reasons why Al is coming on this evening, then stay tuned, because it's going to be an action-packed hour. With that being said, I am Angel Martinez, and this is Broad Street South. With us here live, other than Al Thompson, it is my co-host, Ryan F. Ryan, how are you this evening?
I'm Ryan F. It's great to be with everybody this evening. Angel, how are you? And the topic we're going to discuss tonight, I always get into arguments with fans, fellow athletes of mine.
I had to get some water.
And it's always a big issue. We always get into big arguments about it, and Al will shed some light on it. So let's bring him on.
Yep. So Al Thompson, the editor-in-chief of Football Stories magazine, that you guys can listen also right here on Wednesday nights from 6 to 8 p.m. on Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game. Also the sports director on WRDV, if I got it correctly,
right,
out in Pennsylvania. You guys can listen to it online as well and find that they run 24 hours, 7 days a week, always with good content. But more importantly, it is a different subject this evening, Al. And first of all, thank you so much for coming on the show this evening.
Thank you for having me. And I do want to say, when we're all of us here are talking about what we're going to be talking about, what I'm presenting to you are my takes on this. This is my opinions. These are my what I've taken out from the research that I've done and the experiences that I've had. People are free to fact check me, but it's a sensitive, like you said, subject that is probably in the near future is probably going to get more exposed and more talked about. And that one big thing I want to talk to you tonight about is sports washing. And we'll get to that. It's part of that picture you showed at the beginning about what sometimes what content that our kids see, our teenagers see, we see, can be filtered. And we'll talk about why he gave me that lovely gesture a little bit later. And but my background in this subject and my stuff with Football Stories and WRDB has nothing to do with this.
Right.
Protect Our Youth from Steroids was actually registered in 2016, being a 501c3 in 2019. You can make a donation on poise.org, but we've never had any. But you're welcome to try tonight. And but anyway, this is something that I've always had an interest in. In 1991, I wrote a radio documentary with the great Pat Croce. Do you remember him?
Yes.
And Ron Heller, the Eagles offensive lineman, with Dr. Robert Singh, who is still working with me. He is a physician in Delaware County. He is also the team doctor for Springfield High School. He was with me in 2014 when we were out in Harrisburg. He accompanied me when the first resolution that I was point person for was passed unanimously in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. But anyway, this is something that's always fascinated me. Like I said, I wrote a documentary on the dangers of steroid use. It always amazed me why people I was a prima donna soccer player. Drugs. I'm an artist. I don't do this stuff, right? But I was amazed to see that football players were doing it quite a bit, and you heard track stars and whatever. I just, to me, it was uh, just unthinkable, how powerful these drugs were. And I started getting involved. I ran a strongman show. For most of it was for Welcome America uh, between 2004 and 2012. And I really thought that I was going to, for some idiotic reason, I thought that I was going to be able to convince uh, the people at the World's Strongest Man to drug test, because I was bringing that. I brought my own show with all those guys to Philadelphia at Welcome America in front of tens of thousands of people. We got amazing coverage. We did stuff with the Wilmington Blue Rocks, with the Reading Fighting Phils. We did this whole tour with minor league baseball, doing the Atlas Stones around the base path. It was wildly popular. We appeared on the cover of the Inquirer once, and my shows, and it was to say, hey, look what this could be. You don't have to have all these, supplement companies and weightlifting companies that really don't have the big money like Pepsi or Coca-Cola or some of the bigger companies. And look what this is, a lot more fun, bigger, huge live audiences, right? And I found out I was recruited by IMG to host the World's Strongest Man as part of Welcome America, starting in like 2008. And for 2 years, it went back and forth. And the sticker always was, the city of Philadelphia is not going to invest any resources because IMG wanted tourism money. They wanted to get paid to bring it here. And the talks ended in about 2010. These are general dates, when the foot was put down that we're not doing World's Strongest Man in Philadelphia. We have these massive crowds, potential sponsors, all this stuff, unless there's drug testing. And then the calls just disappeared. And that was that. I started seeing the guys were dying that were in my show and the sport around the world. I ended the shows in 2012 with a drug tested one, and it was a disaster. Only 7 guys showed up. They were local. 3 guys were prison guards. There were 4 other guys. One had retired from World's Strongest Man, said, I'm going to fail the test, but I just want one more show, and if you throw me out, you throw me out, whatever. And people openly admitted to me that they were using at these shows. It wasn't like there was some secret. And sadly, one of the 7 guys that showed committed suicide. And this talk tonight, you're going to hear a lot of fatalities. His mom wrote me and said how much. I mean, you're getting this letter from this guy's mom. He was only 23, and it's like, damn. And so all these things started accumulating to me. That the fact that IMG would just cut off talks like that when we insisted on drug testing. When you learn just how rampant it was and how people didn't care, and even when people died, it just seemed like, when Mike Jenkins died in 2014, Schwarzenegger happened to be there, so he stood for a moment of silence at the Arnold, but he never said a word about it. And so I started really getting involved passionately as someone who was, and I had been a strength coach for 7 years at Archbishop Carroll High School. And the number one thing that I was asked while I was there by parents, because I wasn't a football player, I was a soccer player, but I knew I knew my job. I did a very good job of teaching conditioning. And the number one thing I was asked by parents, and I took very seriously, was, how do I keep my kid off drugs? Is it safe to go to a GNC? He wants to take all these powders home that he sees in these magazines. I said, tell me what's real. And that's coming up later. I'll get into that. But that's me, and just this past March in South Carolina. So I I started passioning about 2012. Started to push back on steroids. I remember talking to the retiring head of the NFL, saying that Joe Horrigan, that um, is it possible that ESPN could lose their vote in the Hall of Fame if they continue to air this show? And he said, "Would you have a discussion about it?" And he said, "Yeah, I would have a discussion about it." And that's a pretty heavy thing, never been publicized, right? Now
Right.
he probably forgets about it. He would probably forget about it right now, but he did say it. And there were people inside ESPN, and I tell this to the high school kids. that wanted it gone. Then how can you have a discussion about whether Roger Clemens and Barry Bonds should be in the Hall of Fame, right, with your panelists? If you were a panelist, Ryan, and on ESPN, and you're airing this World's Strongest Man all the time, and then you're saying, well, I don't think Ryan that these guys Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens should be in the Hall of Fame because they did steroids and this and that. Oh, but coming up next is the World's Strongest Man, the most steroid-infested athletic activity in history. We're making money from it, but we're going to judge these guys. So I was told by people I can't say tonight that that was a big conflict in that station. A lot of people don't know that. That how can you be a real journalist and have this conflict? You follow me? What do you think about that, Ryan? If you were at ESPN, would you be privately? Maybe you can't go on the air and say this is ridiculous. How are we talking about Barry Bonds and Roger Clemens? Well, we're poisoning the youth of this country by showing this crap, right? Make sense?
I mean, to me, it's all about money. It all comes down to money, and they turn a blind eye. And I've been having this argument with years, and I've said to all my friends that have been athletes or athletes in high school or whatnot, if they did concrete drug testing throughout all sports, we wouldn't have sports because it is rampant. It has been rampant. It's been rampant for decades. People don't remember the whole. People are too young to remember the whole Lyle Alzado thing when he developed the brain tumor, and
Yeah.
then he finally came out and admitted he did steroids. And like when Andy Pettitte got caught, using steroids, he admitted it. He went before the media. He said, "This is why I did it," and then nobody said anything after that. Unfortunately,
We
but
need to get, but the new law, a lot of it is that the drug testing, I think it's improved a lot. I think there's still cheaters, but I think that the NFL finally, at Major League Baseball, the NHL, they are taking it more seriously. I mean, I was in a meeting. I was invited up to the NFL headquarters by Troy Vincent in 2019. Now, he didn't say why. He wanted to do an article for Football Stories, but he knew what I was going to start asking him about, and that was drug testing. We was there for 2 hours and talked about that. And I'm sure he wanted to see what I would do with some of this information because the XFL with Vince McMahon was coming out, and they weren't going to drug test at all. All right. So I may have been, who was using who, and it may have also been a reason why at the time was when the Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Act was being formed. It was being created by the Helsinki Commission. Ended up being, I was a volunteer, but I still had a boss, by Paul Massaro, and he may have been picking my brain because I didn't even know the law existed yet, that they were going to endorse it. So he got out of me that I had talked to the USADA because I hear about it all the time, that whether or not, well, the NFL, they're all on drugs. And I said, well, to the USADA, I said, what do you think of the drug testing to this USADA official, USADA, which is WADA's representative here in the United States? What do you think of the drug testing policies of the Big Four sports? And this source said, it's respected here, that they have, finally, I guess, they have a real drug testing. Now, I'm sure they would have loved to have the business, but they did say there's respect here. And the only two sports that this source named were Major League Baseball and the NFL, which are the two biggest, who needed it the most, right? Would you agree? You guys agree? That
Yeah.
those are the sports that probably need it the most, and it was abused the most. So, and I told him that. And maybe that's what he wanted because they endorsed it. Now, he never admitted this. I don't know if that was, but I wasn't. That's my avatar. If you go to my social media page, you can see me there with the tie on.
Right.
That's at the NFL headquarters in New York that day. That's the picture of it. I took a selfie of myself. Who wouldn't if you're there? Hall of Famers. There's probably Hall of Famers that have never been there, so I wasn't going to not record it. So anyway, so part of what we wanted to talk about tonight was the evolution of the Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Act. Two real quick things to go back on. And when ESPN eventually, just for the fact that we were condemning it, I had a resolution by Joe Hackett, whose son played for Ridley and eventually at Ursinus. Joe Hackett here in Delaware County sponsored a resolution condemning the Arnold, condemning IMG's World's Strongest Man, condemning America's Strongest Man, Later, his colleague, Mike Vereb in Montgomery County, had a second resolution. We added a whole bunch of names to it, all the qualifiers. It passed, and this should be encouraging to people because we have in our Pennsylvania state government is a bit cantankerous at times, right? And they don't get along much. It's a big rock fight out there in Harrisburg, right? But these votes are amazing. The 2014, it was 203-0, unanimous, with 28 co-sponsors. The 2016 resolution, with the added names, Arnold is named in it 6 times, passed 196-0. Some people weren't there, with 13 more co-sponsors. That's remarkable, don't you think?
Yeah, it sure is.
And so they were giving me a weapon. Here, we've condemned these events. Go for it. You follow me?
Right.
Now I can start everything off with saying the state of Pennsylvania condemned your event, and to ING, to Arnold Schwarzenegger. And so in 2019, after I have this thing in New York that was kind of strange, like I said, I've known Troy my whole life. I mean, since he was at Pennsbury. And it was interesting. I wrote a big story about, the XFL. I interviewed Oliver Luck. And I asked all these, this is the number 2 guy in the NFL and the CEO of the XFL, and I asked him about drug testing. Why is that so hard? Why, if you're Dana Bash and Chris Wallace and Jake Tapper and Van Jones, can't you ask these people when they're on your show about drug testing? When Schwarzenegger's on 4 times and not one long interviews, and he's not asked once. We'll get into more of that a little bit later on. But anyway, in 2019, I see this law, the Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Act, and it had a 2.5% chance of passing. And I saw what the law was meant to be, and it says that, it's now, if this law passes, sports doping at international events that involve Americans anywhere in the world is an act of felony fraud. And the person that commits this fraud can be held accountable, not only criminally, but financially. So I'm like thinking to myself, could you imagine if a baseball player who got suspended for 80 games, how much he could potentially be costing his team if they say miss the playoffs, translates into merchandise sale? It would be, they'd lose their whole contract. That's my first interpretation of it was. So I called the sponsor, Sheila Jackson Lee of Houston, and they put the person on who was supposed to be the spokesman for this new legislation that she sponsored, and only had a couple of co-sponsors. And one of them was, of all people, Jim Jordan of Ohio. Go figure, right? Talk about opposites. And Sheila Jackson Lee of Houston and Jim Jordan. And so this is fascinating, right? So, and the NFL, I see, endorsed it. So did the NHL. So did Major League Baseball. So did every Olympic team is listed on this thing. I'm like, wow. So I call her. They put the spokesman on. I started asking all these questions. I go, can the player be held responsible financially for the loss of a franchise? Or he hangs up on me. He gets so frustrated because he can't answer any of the questions. Call the chief of staff, contact her, and she sends me to Washington to Paul Massaro, who is the senior advisor for the Helsinki Commission. One thing leads to another, and I'm in the bowels of his building in Washington, D.C., with 8 elected officials on my schedule for that day to go visit as a lobbyist and for the law. And we hit it off really well. I visited 40 offices. I met Tim Kaine in person. I met Jim Jordan in person. Met Brian Fitzpatrick. It's Mary Gay Scanlon, and it grew from just getting interns and newcomers to where I'm meeting with assistant chiefs of staff, and I'm in there and I'm saying, I still remember one with Cory Booker's chief of staff, and this guy advises directly to the senator and influences policy, right? So I'm telling him about this new law that we need him to vote for, and I said, you now have the power. If an American sprinter, they gave me a girl's name, I don't have it right now, but a sprinter's name, she was from 3 Olympics ago, she finished 5th. And there were 2 Russians who finished 2nd and 3rd. Well, a couple years later, remember they started retesting in the Olympics, going
Right.
through all the samples, and they were throwing all medals out. Remember that? And
Yeah.
most of them were Russians, right? And well, they throw these 2 Russians out. So she gets from 5th to 3rd. She gets a bronze medal, but it gets mailed to her UPS. She doesn't get on the podium with the anthem. She doesn't get anything. She gets no appearances. She doesn't get any sponsor money. She gets nothing. Now it's law today that if that happens to an Olympian, and I'm telling this to a senator's chief of staff for the first time, alone in this big boardroom. Um, this made this whole gig so cool. Was I tell him that you have the power to go into Russia's bank, take $500,000, which is what they evaluated what this girl would have made if she had actually gotten the bronze medal, which she should have because the other 2 were doping. She would have gotten 500 grand. You can take it right out of the bank and give it to her. And he leans over the table and he goes, "We can do what?" And I said, "Yeah." So he's like, "Can we make it harsher? Can we add this and that?" And I said, "You're the senator." I go, "If you want to change it, go ahead." But I went to all these offices and I pretty much hit every committee. And the Redchenkov Anti-Doping Act passed almost virtually unanimously. It was a voice call. I didn't get to see the video in the House. And in the Senate, it passed 100-0 to 100-0. And how often does that happen in our U.S. Senate? Never, right?
Next to nothing, right?
It's powerful law. So then now my pay was that when I went to all these places, including telling Tim Kaine in person, was we need to adapt the law to organizations and federations and athletic events that are international, like the law says, that refuse to test. And I said, just look at what we condemned in Pennsylvania, and you've got your list. The Arnold, World's Strongest Man, America's Strongest Man, United States Strongest Man. I mean, it goes on and on and on. These are all qualifiers. And all these federations have in every state. You want to know why all these people are on steroids? Ryan, is every one of these events has qualifiers in every state. They have state seats. And this is from what parents were telling me, and when I ran these shows in Philadelphia, was this is where these kids get introduced to the dark side. You follow me?
Mm-hmm.
So now I started last year, and this is last year I started speaking at high schools. I also started back in Washington. I've been there 3 times since the pandemic. I've been in all those office buildings finally opened up again. I couldn't go back down to Washington anymore and speak to people because of the pandemic closed Washington completely. So I started going back a year ago, and the idea, just watching these committee hearings when I was writing my book, The Gilmore Years, and I did a whole section on the life story of Joe Clancy, who was a Carol grad, where I went, and he was in the school at the same time I was. He was a couple years behind me, but he went on to be the director of the Secret Service. So I wanted to. He went to all these committee hearings where he was behind that table and he's getting drilled by Congress. And I'm watching this because I wanted more quotes from him about the job and everything. And I said, "That's it. How do you adapt this law to these events, these powerful people? How do you do it? Committee hearing." And so, I'm still throwing darts, throwing rocks, and hoping like I got lucky with the with ESPN and the World's Strongest Man, right? That was just a lucky shot, right? That it hit the right people at the right time, and ESPN dropped it. So because people inside ESPN, I didn't finish that. People inside ESPN were literally telling me how to write the letter to get it off the air. They were putting their jobs on the line. You follow me?
Good Lord, yeah.
Undermining their own network, and it worked. It's impossible, right? So now they'll deny it, but I experienced. You know what I mean? I tell the high school kids this at the end when we're talking. Earn this. These people they weren't the only ones. This is, anybody who's ever helped me behind the scenes. They're risking stuff. Earn this. So anyway, so I started writing people who were on the Helsinki Commission that crafted it because the Helsinki Commission was diverted. First, we had the pandemic, then we had the Ukraine war. So the commission that I was a volunteer for is gone again because they are running the Ukraine war. They're basically the ones who are putting together the military packages and all that. And Paul Massaro is like one of the leaders. So I lost Paul. So I'm just, you know, you know, picking names to go see. And one of them was uh, Senator Cardin from Maryland, and he read one of my letters and got Paul Massaro back on the phone with me last March. And Paul was awesome. He meticulously gave me the names of the right commissions, the right people to meet at the commissions who weren't necessarily elected officials, but they were officials for the commission. And the meeting we had in July 10th and 11th, the meetings we had where the commissioner for the commerce, um, commerce, science, and transportation, Lucy Koch, said that this is ripe for oversight, meaning this really needs a hearing. Oversight. She said that in writing to me, after our meeting. And these were the longest meetings I've ever had in Washington.
Right.
Same thing with Senator Cohen, and Congressman Cohen and Senator Wicker, was that, yeah, this is really bad, and IMG just bought half of wrestling. They teamed James, with The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, on a new event called Athleticon in Atlanta, which was kind of a copy of the Arnold. The Arnold's up to 7 cities worldwide. This poison is going on. So he's not a guy like Stallone, where he was using roids, or Lou Ferrigno per se, who were used steroids to gain fame. He's making we think, if the Columbus show is $51 million a year in revenue, and they publish that if he's got 6 other cities, it's probably in the neighborhood of $250 million. There's also a belief in the people I spoke to in Washington that the Arnold, these strongman shows, bodybuilding shows, the World's Strongest Man, and this is just what they're telling me they think it is. These are just ads. That's all they are. Nobody cares who the World's Strongest Man is. Nobody cares who the best bodybuilder is. Nobody cares of these people that are running them.
Right.
It's just an ad. And that would anybody be surprised if some of these individuals that we're talking about here, after you heard about the EpiPen thing with, was it Joe Manchin's daughter was selling EpiPens that should have been 50 cents. She's selling it for $1,800 a piece. The guy that went to jail for the AIDS pill, that was $2,000. It should have been $1. Remember that?
Yep.
Would anybody be surprised if this whole thing was one big charade, these shows, so they could sell steroids? And we believe that it's between $2 and $4 billion a year just in America alone. That's a lot of money. To your point, Ryan. To your point. And what do you do? So it's like we're sitting. These are heavy meetings, right? And so you say a committee hearing. Just pull back the curtain. You can subpoena all these people, put them in those desks, and between yourselves and your own research and what the resources the government has, like I just said, Johnson cleaned off his Facebook page and the website for Athleticon. It just says Athleticon. All the stuff about the bodybuilding and the World's Strongest Man was going to be there. And I think CBS, when ESPN dropped it, IMG's powerful company, CBS Sports Network picked it up. And we were sending them letters, my nonprofit, to the top guy at CBS, that we were going to see about whether they could vote in the baseball awards. None of their writers at CBS have enough time in the association to vote for the Hall of Fame, but they can vote for the other awards. Follow me?
Right.
So we told him that if he didn't stop airing it, our lawyer, that we were going to do this. And he doesn't answer us, but all of a sudden all the reruns, all the filler disappeared. The only time it aired was exactly on when I guess they were contracted for. And these are just our observation. This year, the last year, I think is the last year of the contract with them. which makes sense because now they're partnering with Dwayne Johnson because maybe they can get back on ESPN. The thought was, or maybe some other network that he has influence with, like PBS and TNT that air wrestling. They want to get this back on the air because it's an ad. We think. You follow me? That's pretty horrible stuff. That's pretty sobering, isn't it, Ryan and Angel?
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
it definitely is.
So anyway, so after I start going, we'll shift here. After I start doing all this heavy stuff, I start some doctors in South Jersey, in particular Dr. Sean McMillan says, he says, you got to come with me to these high school things I do and tell these kids this stuff. So I did. I went to a couple of high schools in New Jersey. I got a flyer together and I started, I spoke to a high school in Delaware. Then when I went to cover some Eagles games, I'll be on the road and I would speak to ADs and whatever in Texas, in Houston, Phoenix, Arizona during the Super Bowl week. And I would speak at a lot of Rotary clubs, and they're really awesome audiences, and they're older people, but man, they're really into it, So the I started this, so I figured this is a much better weapon against these things, teaching high school kids and these letters I'm writing to wherever these events like World's Strongest Man was being taken place, whether it was in Bradenton, Florida, to Sacramento, California, where we almost had it. Third year was canceled. We tried to get the second year canceled, but it didn't work. But IMG sent a law firm after me, and that I just see it. Was to start speaking. And so here, if you show the picture here, I'm in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina at this high school. We held a rally in front of 600 kids here. You want to show the photo, Angel? There it is. I had a blast that day. The most memorable day I've been doing this stuff I ever had. And I sucked. I mean, I was all my visual materials were so small. I never expected the crowd to be this big. So I had to walk up and down in front of them to show it to them. And while I'm holding my microphone, and it was, but they were having a good time to the point where the AD came over and took the microphone and says, "Everybody keep quiet and listen to this guy." But I was having a good time. I didn't, it was, we were kind of all having a good time. Anyway,
Right.
so we spoke for 45 minutes. This went on, and they didn't seem to want to stop because they have a huge ovation at the end. So anyway, I spoke at a Rotary Club in North Myrtle Beach. I stopped by the police station, the city services, city hall, and it must have made an impression because I believe that again, these are just my experiences, but the reaction that I got from IMG was that the Chamber of Commerce may have tried to cancel it. When you see that going on and you're the Chamber of Commerce and you're like, yeah, it's not good, right?
Right.
And I'm telling kids, don't go to this, and the steroids and the whole thing I told you about ESPN, I mean, I was, and the Rotary Club, they were angry. I mean, they were like, pissed off at this whole thing. So anyway, mysteriously, 3 weeks later, we're going to do can we do This Appears on Real Sports. Now, Maria Carrillo has ties to IMG, the company that owns the World's Strongest Man. They managed her. I don't know if they still do, but she has serious ties to them. IMG has serious ties to everybody. They control content for so many networks. Powerful organization. That's why when they were dropped by ESPN, they got right onto another network, CBS Sports Network. But we still crippled the show. It still crippled the show to be on CBS Sports Network as opposed to ESPN and getting all those reruns, right? So anyway, this comes on mysteriously to me out of nowhere. Again, you go along with the timeline. This is 3 weeks after my March 7th big day, and this is just to show you what the piece was like. Now these are two 400-pound men, right, brothers. We find out in this thing that he has autism. The one who is a two-time defending champion for World's Strongest Man, who's 440 pounds, and he's coming to Myrtle Beach in a couple of weeks. And I've already been there doing all this stuff, right? So
Right.
here is how and we air mic this, so I apologize for the quality. But this is what it kind of looked. We could talk over it, but go ahead and show the HBO piece on these two brothers.
Mary, when Tom was talking about the Stones and his motivation, did I hear him rank his dog ahead of his sisters?
That's it.
His wife was
All right.
first.
Right, and then he said his dog.
Yeah, I'm
Give
not
me a
sure.
second.
But what's interesting about Tom and about the Atlas?
Yeah, that was the
Stones
one
is
with
that
Mary. So give me a second.
That's the second one. That's
Yeah.
the second part we're showing. The first part you're showing is where they show the dad and all that.
He
There it
dropped
is.
out altogether and retreated to his room.
Locked myself in my room for 2 months and kind of just had dinner in my room, food, lunch in my room, breakfast in my room. Didn't really see my family. That's when I was like, what am I doing here? You know, like I could go into foster home. You know, I could kill myself. You know, it's a lot of emotions going through you.
How much did you worry about Tom's future?
It was constant because we just didn't know what he could do.
What were you afraid his life would be like?
Just a hard going, you know, work-wise, not making much money, possibly looking after him.
Luke had problems of his own, though. Like his dad, he took on a tough blue-collar job on an oil rig, taking him away from home for long stretches. Homesick, he says he developed a drinking problem to cope. That is, until he found a more productive outlet, lifting weights, which he says gave him purpose and direction. And before long, the thrill of victory.
What a performance by Luke Stoltman.
Luke thought that lifting weights might do the same for Tom. So he started taking him to the gym and wound up, he says, creating a monster.
I mean, the gym just transformed from probably within 6 months to a year. Like, it was night and day. I thought, oh, Jesus, what have I done? This is monsters. He's going to just beast me eventually.
Suddenly, a kid who was never very good at anything was hitting milestones at the gym.
Come on, Tom. Come on, pull, all the way up.
Now, that is a. Can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
That's a beautiful piece. It's 15 minutes long, the whole thing, and it's beautiful. There's nothing wrong with that. But you're interviewing two guys that are around 400 pounds, are participating in the Arnold, the world's strongest man, the most steroid-infested athletic activities on the planet. They've been condemned by the state of Pennsylvania. Several of their own competitors on national forums, on ESPN, Hafthor Bjornsson, just a few years before this, admitted, yeah, I do steroids. When Rob Kearney was on the Joe Rogan show, he mocked the drug testing and said the Americans have the best steroids. This is common. For the Arnold, they had one of their lifters gave, and it's common for bodybuilders. They, on their websites that publish the steroid routine that they do, because they don't care, because nobody's going to, it's illegal, right? But nobody cares. This guy was on the cover of the magazine, Volt Fitness, was this guy saying his steroid preparation for the Arnold, right? This is like, can you imagine doing this heroin and cocaine? You'd be arrested. So anyway, This has been going on forever. So anyway, you're Mary Carrillo. You're an Emmy Award-winning journalist, okay? At no time in this thing does she tell the audience that she has ties to IMG, right? She never says that. Now you found out your subject has autism, and he's shooting steroids. In fact, you can show this now, about a year and a half before this happened, before that World's Strongest Man in 2021. I wrote the two of them. I rarely talk to competitors. I'm only after the bosses. But these two, I felt compelled to for whatever reason. And I said, I hope nothing happens today, how I worded it. Probably wasn't that nice. And I said, do you guys understand, you and your brother understand that they're making all the money. You're abusing yourself for peanuts, and you're risking your health, possibly even your life, so that, and I name, who is it, Ari Emanuel and Patrick Whiteside, the CEOs for IMG Endeavor, they're making millions. And I said, do you guys understand that? And this is before some people in Congress think that it's an ad, which I believe 100% now, in my opinion. But anyway, Tom blocks me, right? Now that's all I said to them. and it's pretty shocking. It's like when I'm a recovering alcoholic, 33 years. There were times before I quit where people come up to me and be pretty, like, pretty straightforward with me, to say to speak, about my drinking. So
Right.
looking back on it now, it was the best thing that ever happened to me. Maybe I thought in my ego was too much, and I was doing the same thing to them. But anyway, Tom, the one with autism, blocks me, and this is what Lou Stoltzman did, and you can show it.
Yeah. Which is, to me, it's incredible. How?
You want to show the picture?
Yeah, the picture's up there.
No, I don't see it on here. Luke Stokesman giving me the finger. That's really mature for a professional athlete. When you're getting paid, you're going to get criticized, and it just goes with the territory. There it is. And now I took that screen. I took that with my cell phone, and apparently it was like right on the verge when the taping was going to start, probably in Sacramento. And he was told to take it down, apparently, because it came down, like, it was only up there for a couple hours. So, but anyway, so now, Ryan and Angel, I want to ask you this question. If you're finding out, now she doesn't mention anything, you're welcome to go. If you have on demand, you can go back. It's March 2023, HBO Real Sports. If my subject, first of all, you have to ask them about steroids.
Right.
Is there any testing on this? And she never asked them that at all. Do you think that she should have? And B, should she have addressed if someone who has autism weighs 440 pounds and is shooting steroids, are they at further risk? Now, you don't have to put it as blunt as I did there, but if you're an Emmy Award-winning sportscaster, you'd think some way to bring it into the conversation. Do you agree, Ryan and Angel, that should have been brought up during the segment at some point? You don't have to make the whole segment about it, but the question, I think, should be asked. Do you think?
Ryan, go ahead.
Had anybody asked them, they would have cut the interview short, because they don't want to answer questions like that. Athletes don't want to answer questions about that.
But they asked Hafthor Bjornsson that on ESPN just 2 years ago, and he says, "Yeah, I do steroids."
Arnold's admitted in the past he's done steroids.
Yeah.
So, but it wasn't until later on, not while he was competing, not while the athletes are competing.
No, he recently has. When he found out about these commissions, he's did it. He got somebody from the Athletic to talk to him just recently, and he's now all of a sudden saying people shouldn't do steroids. Well, it's a little late. You've had this show for 40 years, and all these people have died. But anyway, just from a pure journalistic standpoint, shouldn't something have been said? Just to say, I tried.
Yeah, I agree. It's something should have been said, especially when someone has autism. I think the worst thing that you want to do is inject them with steroids. And I just, that baffled me the most. When I watched that piece, I couldn't wrap my head around it, because it doesn't make any sense. Because they're already battling the autism itself. Now you're injecting it, which can make it 1,000 times worse. So I'm sorry,
their behavior towards me in 2021, is that the behavior of someone who's clean?
No.
If I was clean, I'd say, "Hey, I was tested. I'm fine. What are you talking about?"
And even when the athletes are asked, like Fernando Tatis Jr. last year, he got busted for taking Clobazole. I think, Clobazole. And when asked about it, he's like, "Well, I had ringworm and I was taking this. I didn't know how to steroid on it." How stupid do you think we are?
Yeah, and he did walk it back a little bit.
Yeah,
he did walk it back.
But still,
he tried it. He tried it.
Just like in 2005, you mentioned before, when the baseball players went before Congress, and you remember Rafael Palmeiro, I did not take, but he's shaking his finger, and when you get busted, just admit it, and it'll just admit it. But most
people
athletes
will forgive you. People will forgive you. Yeah.
And then, what do you do as an athlete who plays professional sports that's taking stuff, and they have kids, and what are they going to tell their kids? Oh yeah, don't do it. Don't. Athletes are always going to look for the competitive edge. Science is always trying to come up with something that's not detectable. They come up with stuff to mask stuff. So it's just like this ever-ending cycle. And pro athletes are always going to find the quickest way to improve their play on the field or the court or wherever.
Well, the thing is, with the Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Act, where now it's an act of fraud. It's not so much about like a DEA, we had to catch them with product and things like that. You're committing fraud, and the punishment is extraordinary. It's not you're being suspended for 60 or 70 games. You could lose millions. And so this is the first time I think the concept of this law is, I think, the right direction. Now, here we go with Mary Carrillo. Now, at the end of every segment for Real Sports, they go back to, they sit there in front of Brent Musburger's, not Brent Musburger,
Greg Gumbel.
Greg Gumbel, in front of his desk, and Brian Gumbel.
Brian
Gumbel. That's
it's Brian Gumbel, sorry. And so Brian Gumbel, they go back and they sit in front of him and they discuss the segment. And here is, and this is, as a journalist, is where it gets infuriating for me, and I want to see if it's the same thing for you guys, is this is what when he's asked, Brian Gumbel does the right thing and asks her about their steroid use. Her answer would have gotten her, to me, would have gotten her thrown off a high school newspaper. But go ahead if you could show it.
Sure.
Mary, when Tom was talking about the stones and his motivation, did I hear him rank his dog ahead of his sisters?
His wife was first.
Right, and then he said his dog.
Yeah, I'm not sure, but what's interesting about Tom and about the Atlas stones is that he truly believes, he believes in concrete things and literal things. So if he says he's got to lift them to save his family, he does it.
No, I get it. I mean, Tom is 6'8", 400. Luke's almost as big. Where's their size come from? His dad didn't look that big.
He's not that big.
And Sheila didn't look that big.
Sheila wasn't that. Look, these are large human beings. And when you watch them work out, I mean, the stuff they do is amazing.
Anytime people are that size, we think of pharmaceutical assistance. Have these guys been tested for roids?
There is drug testing in this world, and they claim they've never failed a drug test, and they claim that they play clean.
How does Tom's autism still manifest itself today?
I mean, the whole idea of what he has to do, the repetition and all of that. I mean, that's still, as he explained, he eats the same. He wakes up in the same.
Eats a lot.
There's drug testing in this world.
Right.
What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, completely skated around it.
And then she says, they say they've never failed a test. Well, hello, they've never been tested. The obvious follow-up is to that, well, what tests did they take that they passed? Can you tell us that? And it has to be done on camera, even if they get up and walk out. The fix was in. If there was any doubt about it, by just the piece alone, when she says there's drug testing in this world,
right,
that means an HBO, to me, an HBO or an IMG attorney sat down, and this is how you phrase it, Maria, this is how you phrase it. And that's what she did. We wrote them. I wrote the producers of this show and demanded an explanation on that ridiculous scene. Nothing. We wrote the Emmy Awards. We wrote anybody had anything to do with this. We wrote them, either on social media or directly, and no answers. Complete silence. All right. And so I don't know what your thoughts are on that, Ryan. And I know how you feel overall, but just let's stay with that segment and just how, to me, it was kind of insulting to the human race to do something that ridiculous.
Well, it's almost like she didn't want to offend the IMG that she was affiliated with, or she.
They managed her. They managed her for many years. They may still be managing her, but she has ties to IMG, and you're supposed to reveal that during an interview. People do it all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. Doesn't mean she can't do an interview with somebody else from IMG. Just got to tell people. And she didn't. And then comes up with that finale.
Well, that would have been, like you said before, somebody like a Jeremy Schaap that, asked the hard-hitting questions. And obviously she wasn't going to even go into that. For whatever reason that she had, that I don't even know, I can't explain it. But any hard-hitting journalist would have delved into that, and for whatever reason she just didn't, which is infuriating.
Angel?
Yep. No, it is infuriating because again, how do you circle around that? And then when Brian Gummo asked him about the autism, and she says, "Oh, he's got to do repetitions, and you have to see him and do repetitions," and so you avoid it for a second time, not stating that obviously it's bad for him, but you want to go with he's doing repetitions, which that itself is just infuriating when she says it. When you go back, you look at the entire thing because you already know that his brother was the one that got him all juiced up and pumped up from it. And then
And
there was
he,
another one.
go ahead.
There's another place where that I know it's not necessarily in this party ad or the video, but where they were both brothers were working out, and there were young kids inside of the workout gym where they were, and these kids are looking at them both pumping iron, not knowing that obviously they're on roids. And the one guy they said, they put his name out there, and he was a center for a team. But it's amazing to me where Mary stooped down so low in her career again, and an award-winning journalist, and just folded to what steroids, I guess, line her pockets with. It's just in my own opinion.
So I'm hoping. I mean, if there was people that you would like to see on this committee that would be brought to answer questions, I the list I handed in, and it doesn't mean it's going to be the ones that if they do this, that it's going to be the ones that they bring in. But of course, Schwarzenegger was at the top of the list. IMG CEOs Ari Emanuel, Patrick Whiteside, um, the owner of Rogue Fitness, who sponsors all these events, the CBS president, uh, the who aired this thing for the last 10 years. Um, it's interesting when I emailed somebody from ESPN that what the how this came out. All of us, July 10th and 11th, like a few days later, all of a sudden, um, the piece on Rafael Palmeira
Mm-hmm.
and his life, and they show scenes from the 2005. All of a sudden, that the rerun started running on like ESPN News. I was like, I wonder if that's a coincidence, but who would you like to see brought in there? You would be curious to see what their answers are to these things. Dwayne
I do.
Johnson is also on the list, obviously.
That was gonna be one of mine was Dwayne Johnson because again he's an icon to a lot of folks. Obviously, a lot of people love what he does on TV. I
Tremendously
do know,
successful.
yeah, I know he also does a lot of charity work and everything else. But I would love to
Yes.
see it because he's what 51 years old and still
Yeah.
that don't no different than Stallone as well. But it's amazing to me at 51 you're still able to do what you do that and me being 2 years older. There's no way in the world I can bulk up to as much as the way The Rock has.
Yeah. But
I'll say this about Dwayne Johnson. I'll defy anybody to go check his build out when he was in the WWE, and that was when he was in his 20s. And you fast forward today and look at his physique. I don't care who the hell you are. You're taking something to go from that to what you look like now at 51, 52 years
yeah,
old.
it's
So
gonna. He's taking a big chance on himself, on his own health. Um, the You have to hope that he sees the light somehow. I doubt it. Um, but Lou Ferrigno doesn't do anything anymore. He's in his 70s. Neither does Schwarzenegger. But Lou Ferrigno does all these shows. He's got a big booth every year at the Arnold. He's at all the Comic Con. But everything that he does is based on his steroid days when steroids were legal when he made the Hulk. But his Facebook, his internet presence, everything that he markets himself on is images of himself on steroids, and he was on steroids when he made the Hulk, and maybe that's why we don't see it so much. And now, congratulations to the movie industry, because most of the time um, they use CGIs now. The new
Right.
Hulk is all CGI. That's the way to do it. When Deadpool 2, there were some big monster characters in that. It appears to be all cartoons. Now, interesting enough that the dude in Free Guy is a real human being, and he's an IFBB pro bodybuilder. And Dwayne Johnson, do you know, appears in that movie? Did you know that? Did you ever see Free Guy?
No.
I haven't, no.
Oh, okay. Free Guy is Ryan. What the hell's his name? He did Deadpool. What's
Oh, I know
Ryan
you're talking about.
Reynolds.
what is
Yeah.
it?
Ryan Reynolds.
Ryan Reynolds is Free Guy. It's an internet fantasy flick. But instead of using the CGI for this character dude, he uses a real guy. And the one of the things I want to do, if we have this, if there's a law that's going to be that's an adaptation to, adapted to, or an addition to, and they're going to name it, the law, the Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Act. Rodchenkov is the Russian trainer who turned in his the Russian Olympic team to WADA and got them suspended. So they named the law after him, and he's in protective custody here. He could be living in Orlando for all we know. He could be living, in Reading, Pennsylvania for all we know, but he's in protective custody. And and John McCain famously would he named the street outside the Russian embassy over somebody Putin murdered, so that all their mail comes in with the guy's name as the street name, to remind them. And so,
Good Lord.
I would. Kane was amazing with that stuff, But I
Uh-huh.
would like to name the. I would like to name the adaptation, if there's going to be a name for it, to be Jeep Swenson. And Jeep Swenson played the original Bane on Batman and Robin when you had Uma Thurman and Arnold Schwarzenegger. She was Poison and he was Mr. Freeze. Remember that huge monster
Yeah, yeah.
Bane? Well, that wasn't a CGI. He really looked like that. He was that big in real life. And I talked to some guys. What's even weirder with this whole thing is that when I met The Rock in 2000, and he was a different person. Right, he may have been juicing a little bit, but he wasn't anything like he is now. I met him at Gold's Venice Beach just for a minute. He was standing there at the weight rack, and and that same visit, I met up with Tom Prince, who was a big time bodybuilder, and he was enormous at the time. And he actually did a little interview with me, and he talked about how Jeep Swenson was the biggest man he had ever seen. That he did so many drugs, and he was pretty honest about it, and about himself and about about Jeep Swenson's drug use, because he was so obsessed with being in a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he died 30 days after the movie came out at the age of 40, with his wife at his bedside with his daughter, and according to The Guardian, they interviewed her. His last words were, "What did I do to myself?" And so I'd like to see them name it, because he was a pro wrestler with Vince McMahon and all them. He was involved in strongman. He was in the movies. He was he touches all the bases just about of Steroid Nation. And what a better way to remind them? Here's example A. You know what I mean? Like that's just insanity. He literally killed himself to be in a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger. What good did it do to do all these drugs? So we are. How long? Much longer do we have here?
We got about 2 minutes left.
Oh, okay, and I'm yakking away here. So if at January, in October 2nd and 3rd, we're having the second round of meetings. I'm hoping that something concrete comes out of it, other than the desire to to have these committee hearings. Ryan, we'd like to put your people like you. There's so many people like you and me who really want to see change, and I think the Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Act is that big direction. That you're not depending on the what's it called, the trying to think of the name of that. You're swatting mole batting. What's it called? But you're just with the way it's been, it's like it's impossible to have any kind of control over it. The Rodchenkov Anti-Doping Act, I think, is a direction, the right direction to be going in, to hold people accountable in a different way, and it also, I hope that ending these events, the purpose of protecting youth from steroids is you're not going to change any of these guys' minds today. You're not. Steroid Nation, they're done. Forget it. But that 13-year-old boy who turns on his internet and he sees the World's Strongest Man Facebook and Twitter pages, he sees all the Arnold stuff, he sees all these bodybuilders and all this stuff, and then a certain percentage of them get smitten. The whole idea is to cut that off. Let's start raising our kids. We had the right idea when ESPN dropped World's Strongest Man in 2013. But the people who want to keep this going moved it to another network. Just get rid of it. Get rid of it. If you're not going to drug test, it's got to go. So we'll see what happens. But I appreciate you guys having me on. I really do.
And Angel, I'll say this. Anybody who knows Ronnie Coleman, who was 8-time championship bodybuilder, go back and look at what he looked like 20, 30 years ago, even 35 years ago when he was on stage performing, as to what he looks like today. And there's videos of him on YouTube of what he looks like today. He can barely walk.
Yeah.
He can barely get around. He can barely do anything. Or look at Lex Luger from, the WWE.
Yep.
I mean,
that was poison.
It's pure poison. And you can tell. Look at Barry Bonds early in his career.
Yeah.
And you looked at him when he set the home run record.
Yeah.
You don't look like that and gain that kind of size.
You go from hitting 40 home runs to 73.
Right.
When you're almost 40.
And Ryan, you bring up a great point because I happen to have something here of what you just brought up as far as with Barry Bonds. So we'll end up with this here.
Finally tonight, an open letter to baseball's usual suspects. Dear Barry, Roger, Sammy, and Raphael, I'm writing in hopes you saw Mark McGwire's phony non-apology last week and learned from it. I'm assuming that you, like most people not named Tony La Russa, got a good laugh out of Mark's crocodile tears and his self-serving claims about truth, guilt, and the pharmaceutical way. So on behalf of all fans, do us a favor. If and when you're ready to come clean, don't insult us with talk of how much of what you did was God-given and how much was chemically induced. Let us figure that out, okay? And don't play us for idiots. Spare us the lies about taking roids for health reasons. We're all grown-ups. You took stuff for the same reason most of us break or bend rules. You thought you could get away with it. And you did. You did because Commissioner Bud, being Bud, was, of course, asleep at the switch when you suddenly grew Shrek-like necks and bloated biceps. But even Bud is selling absolution these days. He's cheering any and all mea culpas, even half-assed ones. If you don't believe me, just ask A-Rod, Manny, Poppy, Jason, and the others who've come forward because they had to. There may be no crying in baseball, but there is forgiveness, maybe even enough to get you to Cooperstown. In closing, guys, please feel free to share this letter with Bagwell, Nomar, Pudge, and all those others who went from hitting homers to power outages overnight. Tell them fans are ready to accept what happened. Tell them we're ready to move on. Tell them that most of us get it, even if they, like you, still don't.
What a hypocrite.
Yeah, big time.
Big time hypocrite.
Yep.
Big time. Absolute. I'm glad you found that. That's an amazing piece on him. What a hypocrite. When you just saw what happened with the World's Strongest Man.
Right. Yep.
He just folded like a cheap suit. And
Yeah.
he's a bigger disgrace than them because he knows better.
Yep, so true. But
anyway.
And that's why I wanted to end it with that because it's amazing to me that, and obviously you can tell the difference between that and then with the Mary interview and the other ones you done post, because if you brought it up, back in 2005 and you thought it was, it was wrong to do it back then with the baseball players, but it's okay as long as IMG or anybody else is going to, be able to do it. It's wrong to me. And it's a shame because again, journalism today is nothing like it was when we were all growing up. But
there are people out there that will do it. We need we need these commission hearings when people still talk about 2005. They quote it. We have to give honest journalists that ammunition to talk about it. How do you talk about it? Commission. Congressional commission. Pull back the curtain. Bring their asses in under subpoena and under oath, and let's ask the question. Right?
Yep, that's so true.
All right.
Listen, I'd like to thank everybody who listened in over on Amp Radio, of course, right here live on Sports Radio 102.9 FM, The Game, also on broadstsouth.com and over on YouTube. And Al, I can't thank you enough for bringing this up this evening. I hope a lot of people who listen in and those who will watch the replay learn a lot from it. And there's still more to come because he'll be back in DC in October, not only just fighting for, for everyone, for himself, and for those who know that steroids is not one of those things you definitely want to put in your body. You should never have any kind of substance whatsoever in your system. So with that all being said, thank you, Ryan, for joining me as well. Of course, my producer, Debbie, over in Studio B. And for Al Thompson, Al, you have one more thing?
No, I was just saying hey to Ryan.
No problem.
I should have done that.
So thank you, Al, and
Angel, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Al.
Take care.
And thank you for everyone who listened in tonight. We will see you all sometime next week.